Chapter 1. The Mask Returns. They said the heiress was gone forever, that her disgrace had buried her name so deep, no one would dare whisper it in public again. Yet here she was, standing in the heart of the city's most glittering gala, cloaked in a new identity, her face hidden behind a mask of power and wealth. No one recognized her. Not yet. But they would. The whispers began the moment she raised her glass, her voice steady, commanding, and impossible to ignore. A staggering donation, larger than anything the city's elite had ever seen, slipped from her lips. The crowd gasped, eyes wide, mouths parted, as the mysterious benefactor seized the spotlight without so much as revealing her name. She was Isabella, the disgraced daughter her family had disowned, now risen from the ashes as a shadow no one could touch. And she had come for one reason only: revenge. Across the ballroom, Marcus, the brother who had engineered her downfall, tightened his jaw. To him, this stranger was a threat, an intruder who dared to upstage the family empire. He leaned toward his allies, whispering venom, swearing to unmask this arrogant interloper before the night was done. But Isabella's eyes were not on Marcus, they were on him. Adrian, the man who had once been her brother's closest friend, the man she had loved from afar in silence, the man who had watched her banishment with conflicted eyes and done nothing to stop it. Now, years later, his gaze locked onto her with startling intensity, as if some piece of him recognized the pulse beneath her disguise. He tilted his head, studying her, suspicion already clouding his thoughts. She forced herself to look away, her heart racing in ways she could not afford. Revenge demanded composure. Desire was weakness. The evening surged forward, laughter echoing, glasses clinking, but beneath the glitter ran a current of tension so sharp it could cut. Isabella drifted through the crowd, her every word calculated, her every smile a dagger. With subtle precision, she whispered to power players who had once belonged to her family's inner circle, sowing doubts, planting rumors, shifting allegiances. Marcus's empire was a fortress, but Isabella knew its cracks. She had built the hammer to smash it. Tonight was only the beginning. Then came Adrian's approach. His presence was magnetic, his expression sharp, guarded, yet curious. He stepped into her path, blocking her retreat, his voice low enough for her ears alone. "Have we met before?" His tone carried more suspicion than politeness. For a heartbeat, the world froze. She could feel the old pull, the dangerous gravity that had once threatened to unravel her heart. She forced a faint smile. "Would you remember if we had?" His eyes narrowed. He didn't believe in coincidences. He never had. Something in her poise, in the tremor she tried to bury, betrayed her. He reached for her hand in a casual gesture, but when his fingers brushed against hers, the spark was unmistakable. A current shot between them, memory, longing, recognition, and for a split second, she feared he knew. She pulled back too quickly, covering her retreat with a laugh that carried just enough arrogance to disguise the crack in her armor. But Adrian wasn't fooled. He leaned closer, whispering, "You feel familiar, dangerous, and I intend to find out why." She turned away before her resolve broke, moving swiftly into another circle of guests, her mask of power firmly back in place. But inside, her heart thundered, reminding her that revenge was not the only fire she carried into this room. The evening's climax came when Marcus, basking in the shallow glow of attention, announced a new acquisition. His family's empire had secured control of a rival company, a victory he declared as proof of their dominance. Applause followed, but Isabella's smile curled coldly. This was the moment she had waited for. She raised her voice, each word deliberate, slicing through the noise like a blade. Calmly, with effortless authority, she declared ownership of that same company. The room went silent. Whispers erupted, scandal dripping from every corner. Investors, donors, rivals, they all turned their eyes to Marcus, whose face drained of triumph and filled with fury. Gasps spread as the realization sank in. The masked philanthropist had outplayed him, humiliated him, stolen victory from his hands in front of the city's elite. Adrian's jaw tightened, his gaze snapping back to her. Shock flickered in his eyes, but beneath it, recognition burned brighter. Whoever she wasn't just here to dazzle. She was here to destroy. Marcus, trembling with rage, stepped forward, his voice shaking but venomous. "You think you can humiliate me in my own house? Fine. Let the world watch. By the end of tonight, I will rip that mask from your face and reveal exactly who you are." The room erupted, half in gasps, half in murmurs of delight. The tension was electric, as if the very walls strained to contain it. Isabella didn't flinch. She only tilted her head, her silence more damning than any retort. The power had shifted, and Marcus knew it. But she also knew the danger had just doubled, because Marcus never played fair, and Adrian was watching too closely. The night was far from over, but already the lines had been drawn. Isabella had struck her first blow. Her brother's empire had been wounded, the whispers had begun, and as she stepped back into the shadows of her own making, the promise of war hung heavy in the air. She had returned not as the daughter they disowned, but as the storm they could not stop. Marcus's vow echoed in her ears, a chilling promise of exposure. By sunrise, someone would bleed. Chapter 2. The Dangerous Alliances. The vow Marcus spat in front of the city's elite still hung in the air like a curse. Isabella's mask concealed her face, but her heart pounded with the knowledge that tonight's victory had already put her in greater danger. Marcus would not rest until he exposed her, and Adrian, his gaze, still burned into her like a brand was drawing far too close to the truth. She had humiliated her brother before powerful investors, and now, every whispered conversation in the gala carried her name. The masked philanthropist had become the evening's obsession. Some hailed her as a savior, others as a threat. But Isabella only cared about one thing, tightening the noose around Marcus's empire until it snapped. The next move had to be swift, calculated, fatal. She slipped into a quiet corridor, away from the glittering chaos, scanning the numbers on her phone. Her silent strikes had already begun. Hidden transfers, destabilizing trades, each piece of Marcus's empire carefully dismantled by the fortune she had secretly built. By dawn, the first cracks would appear, but she wasn't alone for long. "Running already?" Adrian's voice cut through the shadows, sharp and demanding. He stepped forward, blocking her escape again. His eyes filled with suspicion and something more dangerous, recognition. "You're reckless," he murmured. "Bold, but you feel too familiar to be a stranger." She steadied her breath, masking her turmoil with a tilt of her head. "Perhaps you're simply drawn to power you can't control." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Or perhaps I'm standing face to face with someone I should have never let disappear." The words sliced into her, stirring old wounds she had buried deep. His nearness threatened to pull her under, but she could not allow it. She forced a cold smile, whispered, "Then you should forget me again," and brushed past him before her resolve fractured completely. Back in the main hall, Marcus was already circling like a predator, scanning every move she made. At his side stood Sophia, her smirk sharp, her eyes brimming with jealousy. The socialite had always coveted status above all else, and now the masked stranger had stolen her spotlight. Isabella read her easily. Sophia would betray anyone to reclaim her throne at Marcus's side. Exactly as planned. Isabella leaned into her disguise, weaving conversations, making offers so enticing that the city's titans began drifting from Marcus toward her orbit. The shift was subtle, but undeniable. Power was changing hands. Loyalty was slipping through Marcus's fingers, and he knew it. His fury was barely contained. The evening's crescendo came at a private auction, the room filled with hushed anticipation as the final item was revealed, a controlling stake in one of Marcus's prized companies. He smirked, certain of victory. This acquisition was meant to prove his invincibility after the humiliation Isabella had delivered earlier. The bidding began. Numbers climbed higher. Marcus's hand steady, confident. But then Isabella's voice rang out, calm, controlled, devastating. Each bid from her lips cut deeper, unraveling his composure. Gasps echoed as she outbid him again and again, until, with one final strike, she claimed the company for herself. The room erupted in disbelief. Marcus's face flushed with rage, his empire crumbling before his eyes. Investors whispered in panic. For the first time, the untouchable Marcus looked weak. Isabella's victory was intoxicating, but the true danger arrived the moment Adrian moved to shield her from Marcus's fury. He stood close, his presence electric, his voice low. "You're playing a dangerous game. Tell me who you are, or I'll tear the truth from you myself." She turned to him, her mask inches from his face. His closeness was unbearable. his intensity pulling her back to nights she had long tried to forget. Her voice trembled despite her will. "You don't want to know. Try me," he whispered. Her heart thundered. For a fleeting, reckless second, she allowed herself to feel it, the pull between them, the forbidden spark that had never died. Their lips hovered dangerously close, the world around them dissolving, until reality snapped her back. She pushed him away with trembling hands. "I can't want you. Not now." The pain in her eyes betrayed her before she turned and fled, leaving him standing in turmoil. But the night was not hers to escape so easily. In a private chamber, Marcus slammed his fist onto the table, his fury uncontrolled. Sophia, eager to please and claw back relevance, leaned close, whispering poison into his ear. She had seen enough tiny slips, careless details to suspect the truth. And though she lacked proof, her suspicion was enough to ignite Marcus's obsession. "Find me evidence," he snarled. "Every transaction, every rumor. If this woman thinks she can mock me, she'll pay in blood. I'll tear her mask off in front of them all." Sophia's smile curled. She would deliver, not for loyalty, but for the pleasure of watching another woman fall. The gala stretched deeper into the night, but Isabella's mind was already racing. Marcus was cornered, desperate, which made him lethal. Adrian was circling closer, his suspicion now unavoidable. And Sophia, her hunger for destruction gleamed too brightly to ignore. Still, Isabella would not falter. Every humiliation she inflicted on Marcus was justice for the years she spent exiled, nameless, stripped of her birthright. Tonight, she was not weak. Tonight, she was the hand of vengeance. But vengeance carried a price, and the next blow was about to fall. As the final toast of the evening rang out, Marcus appeared at the top of the grand staircase, his voice booming across the hall. In his hand were papers, thick and damning, his smirk of venomous promise. "Ladies and gentlemen," he declared, his tone dripping with triumph, "the masked philanthropist who dares to play with our city's future is no mystery at all. I hold here the proof of her true identity." Gasps tore through the room. All eyes turned to Isabella. Adrian's gaze locked on hers, his chest rising with conflict, with dread, with something dangerously close to certainty. Marcus raised the papers high, savoring the tension, ready to rip the mask from her face before the world. Isabella stood frozen, every nerve screaming. She had always known this moment would come, but not tonight, not yet. And yet, here it was. The empire she had built trembled on the edge of collapse, her secret balanced on the edge of exposure. Adrian's eyes pleaded with questions he dared not ask aloud. Sophia's grin widened, eager to watch her fall. Marcus's voice thundered again. "Shall we reveal the ghost who thinks she can haunt me?" The room leaned forward, breathless, ravenous for scandal. And Isabella knew by the time the next heartbeat passed, her entire world might shatter. Chapter 3. Unmasking the Heart. Marcus stood at the top of the staircase, the weight of 100 stairs feeding his triumph. In his hand, the papers shook slightly, not from weakness, but from anticipation of the destruction he was about to unleash. His voice boomed across the hall, venom dripping from every word. "You want to know who hides behind this mask? You want to know who dares to mock me, to humiliate me? The proof is right here." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Every head turned toward Isabella. The whispers grew frantic. Some with curiosity, some with hunger, others with fear. Her mask hid her expression, but inside her chest thundered with the beat of war drums. She had spent years crafting this persona. Years weaving a fortune out of exile. Years preparing for this very battle. But Marcus had cornered her faster than she planned. Adrian's eyes locked on her, unreadable yet blazing. He didn't move, didn't speak, but his stillness screamed louder than any accusation he already knew. Or he was beginning to know. Marcus grinned, savoring the silence before the storm. Then he ripped the mask from her face. The crowd erupted. Shouts, gasps, shrieks, chaos swallowed the room. And there she stood, revealed not as a stranger, but as the daughter once disgraced, the heiress disowned, the ghost thought to be gone forever. "Isabella," someone whispered, and the name spread like fire. Marcus's voice rose above the noise. "My sister, the traitor who squandered her inheritance, who was cast out for shame." She slithered back under a false face, stealing fortunes that never belonged to her. A fraud, a parasite feeding on what she lost. He expected her to crumble. He expected her shame to consume her again. But Isabella did not bow. Her voice cut clean through the din. You dare call me a fraud? You! Marcus the thief who drained accounts behind closed doors, who embezzled funds from your own investors, who built his empire on lies? Shall I show them the records? The proof of your rot? The crowd gasped again, louder this time, the balance shifting. Eyes turned not to her disgrace, but to his betrayal. Murmurs swelled. Was it true? Could the perfect heir be nothing more than a criminal hiding behind family name? Marcus paled for a heartbeat before rage twisted his face. Lies! He barked, but the doubt had already been sown. Adrian stepped forward then, the weight of his loyalty dragging behind him. He looked at Isabella with raw intensity, his voice barely above a whisper meant only for her. It's you. It's always been you. Her heart twisted. For years she had dreamed of him speaking those words. Yet here, in the center of chaos, they cut as deep as they healed. You shouldn't care, she whispered back. I can't help it, he answered, voice rough, haunted. But their stolen moment was shattered when Sophia's sharp laugh pierced the air. She stepped into the center, her lips curling with cruel delight. Oh, this is rich, she purred. The lost heiress returns as some masked avenger, and we're supposed to believe she's clean? Please. She built her fortune by crawling through the same filth as Marcus. Don't be fooled. She's no savior. She's just another liar with blood on her hands. The crowd turned restless again. Sophia's words slithered like poison, her smirk triumphant. She wasn't finished. And if you want proof, she said sweetly, you'll have it soon. I've sent copies to the press documents exposing how Isabella funded her empire with stolen accounts. By morning, her empire will burn, and she'll be the one in chains. The knife of betrayal cut deeper, because it was laced with truth and lies so seamlessly woven. Isabella knew exactly what Sophia had done, planted falsified evidence that painted her as the criminal. Evidence convincing enough to destroy her, if it was believed. For the first time that night, Isabella faltered. Adrian saw it, his hand twitching as if to reach for her, but Marcus's laughter thundered, drowning him out. You see? You see the truth? She isn't strong, she isn't powerful. She's nothing. A fraud who crawled back from exile only to choke on her own deceit. The crowd leaned, hungry for blood. Some jeered, others whispered, and the foundations Isabella had built shook beneath her feet. Her breath came sharp, but her eyes hardened. No, she said, her voice low, burning. I didn't claw my way back to crumble at your feet. You think you've won, Marcus? You think your lies can bury me again? You've mistaken me for the girl you destroyed years ago. I am not her anymore, and you will fall. The fire in her voice silenced the hall, even if only for a breath. Adrian took that moment, stepping closer, his voice rough with urgency. Tell me what's real, Isabella. Tell me everything, before it's too late. I need to know who I'm fighting for. Her eyes met his, the storm of years between them breaking open. For a heartbeat, she let herself be vulnerable. I built my empire not just to destroy him, she whispered, her voice shaking, but to prove I was never powerless, to prove I was worth something, even when the world left me with nothing. Adrian's gaze burned, torn between his past loyalties and the woman before him. Then, as though pulled by a force greater than reason, he kissed her. Fierce, desperate, forbidden. The world around them gasped, some in scandal, some in awe. But for Isabella, the moment was ablaze, years of silence breaking, a fire she had sworn to smother now consuming her. When they pulled apart, her chest ached with fear and longing. This will ruin us both, she whispered. Then let it, Adrian answered, his voice raw. But ruin was already coming. Because Sophia's plan had unfolded too perfectly, the press had been tipped off. Screens flickered to life around the gala, displaying damning documents, forged but convincing, framing Isabella as the mastermind of financial crimes. Her face, no longer masked, stared back at her, painted as a thief, a criminal, a fraud. The room erupted in chaos once more. Investors shouted, society figures recoiled, and Marcus's laughter rang triumphant. Your empire is ash, he roared. Your mask is gone, and soon your freedom will be too. Adrian turned to her, his face pale, conflicted. Tell me this isn't true. Tell me you're not guilty. Tears burned in her throat, but her voice stayed steady. It's a lie. You know me. His eyes closed, torn apart by the war between love and survival. Before she could say more, the ballroom doors burst open. Uniformed officers stormed in, their voices sharp, commanding. Isabella, by order of the court, you are under arrest. The crowd gasped. Marcus's smirk widened into savage triumph. Sophia's eyes gleamed with cruel delight. And Adrian stood frozen, his choice hovering in the balance as the woman he loved faced destruction. The officers moved closer, the clink of handcuffs chilling the air. And Isabella knew this was not the end of her war. It was only the beginning. Chapter 4. The Heiress's Triumph. The cold steel of handcuffs clicked shut, and the sound cut through the gala like a blade. Isabella stood in the center of the chaos, her wrists bound, her mask gone, her identity exposed. The crowd, once captivated, now erupted in a storm of jeers and whispers. Marcus drank in the spectacle with savage delight. Sophia's grin stretched wide beside him. At last, their enemy was caged. Or so they believed. Take her away! The officer barked, gripping Isabella's arm. But Isabella's eyes burned with something her captors did not expect: defiance. She had anticipated this, even the betrayal Sophia had orchestrated. And she had prepared her own noose, ready to slip around their necks at the perfect moment. Adrian pushed through the crowd, his face pale with turmoil, his voice raw. Wait, she's not what you think she island. Marcus laughed cruelly. Oh, Adrian, always so gullible. Look at her caught, exposed, disgraced again. You'd ruin yourself for her? Adrian's fists clenched, his loyalty torn, but he didn't look away from Isabella. Tell me you have a way out, he whispered, his voice trembling with hope and fear. Her lips curved, not in a smile, but in the unshakable resolve of someone who refused to bow. I always do. The officers began leading her toward the exit, but her voice cut across the hall, loud and commanding. Before you drag me away, perhaps you should verify your evidence. Unless you prefer to arrest the wrong person in front of every influential witness in this room. The room stilled. The officer hesitated. Isabella tilted her head toward the projection screen still flashing Sophia's falsified documents. Check the signatures, she said coolly. Reference the accounts. Every forgery leaves fingerprints. And the fingerprints you'll find belong not to me, but to the criminals standing right behind you. Gasps rippled. Eyes darted to Marcus, then Sophia. Their smug confidence faltered. Sophia scoffed, though her voice wavered. Desperation, nothing more. But Isabella pressed on, her words precise, sharp, devastating. You thought I wouldn't anticipate betrayal? That I wouldn't prepare for it? Every lie you leaked was bait, and you swallowed it whole. The officer frowned, gesturing for a subordinate to examine the files. Within minutes, the truth unraveled. Embedded in the evidence were traces of falsification markers leading directly back to Sophia's personal accounts. Worse, funds Marcus had siphoned from investors surfaced in damning clarity. The hall erupted. Gasps, curses, shouts of outrage filled the air. The predators had been exposed as prey. Sophia's face drained of color, panic twisting her features. No, this isn't possible. She planted it. Marcus roared in fury, shoving her aside. You idiot! You ruined everything! But it was too late. The officers turned, cuffs ready not for Isabella, but for them. Sophia shrieked as her wrists were bound, her venom now reduced to pleas. Marcus fought, furious, but even he couldn't escape the iron grip of law and consequence. The crowd, moments ago hungry for Isabella's downfall, now turned on the fallen heirs of corruption. Investors hissed, former allies recoiled. The empire Marcus had clung to crumbled in real time. The legacy he had stolen burning to ash before his eyes. Isabella stood tall, her cuffs unlocked, her freedom restored. The storm had broken, and she was the one left standing in its wake. Yet amid the chaos, her gaze found Adrian. His face was a battlefield relief. Guilt, longing, shame. He had almost betrayed her. He had almost believed the lies. And now, in the silence between them, the question hung heavy. Would he choose her, truly, or had ambition already claimed him? She stepped closer, her voice low but cutting. You doubted me. For a moment, you almost left me to drown. His voice cracked. I was afraid. I've lived my whole life fighting for survival, for power, for a name that meant something. And when you stood there, accused, I froze. I thought if I chose you, I'd lose everything. Her eyes burned with unshed tears, but her tone stayed fierce. Then tell me, Adrian, what means more to you? Power or me? The silence stretched. The gala's remnants murmured, watching them as though this moment mattered more than the downfall of an empire. At last, Adrian's shoulders sagged. His voice, rough and unguarded, carried across the room. You! It's always been you. Not the empire, not Marcus, not any crown I could build. Just you. The confession cracked something inside her. For years she had buried her longing, turned her love into stone so it wouldn't betray her quest. And now, as the empire of her enemies lay in ruins, she allowed herself to feel. He reached for her hand not as a man reaching for power, but as a man reaching for redemption. And this time, she didn't pull away. Their lips met in a kiss raw with pain, relief, and the promise of something stronger than vengeance. The crowd gasped, but Isabella no longer cared. For the first time, victory tasted of more than destruction, it tasted of love. When they broke apart, Marcus spat curses from where he was dragged away. His voice, a venomous hiss. You think this is over? You think you've won? Isabella's gaze burned with fire as she looked at him one last time. It's already over. You just never saw it coming. The officers dragged him into the night, his empire collapsing behind him. Sophia followed, broken, her poison spent. Silence settled, heavy and reverent. The once disowned heiress now stood as the most powerful figure in the room, her name restored, her future unshackled. Adrian moved closer, his forehead resting against hers. What happens now? She smiled faintly, the weight of years finally lifting. Now, we rebuild. Not an empire, a life. Together. The promise hung between them, fragile but unbreakable. And as dawn broke beyond the city's towers, whispers spread like wildfire. The girl they had cast out had returned not as a ghost, not as a fraud, but as a queen. The heiress's vengeful masquerade was over. Ultimately, this was the story of a disowned heiress who returned under a mask, determined to destroy the family empire that cast her aside. Every gala became a battlefield of secrets, betrayal, and manipulation, until even her closest allies questioned her motives. Yet in the midst of vengeance, a forbidden love grew, threatening to undo everything she had built. In the end, truth shattered the lies. Her enemies fell to their own greed, and she emerged not just victorious, but finally free to claim both justice and love. If this story kept you hooked, don't forget to subscribe for more passionate, high-drama romances. Your support truly means everything. Thank you for watching.